Hello everyone. Today I'd like to talk a bit about the recent decision by President Obama to take a stance against Russia for their alleged involvement in hacking during the U.S. presidential election. An article in the Washington Times reports what the president has decided to do. The article states, Obama slaps sanctions on Russia, expels intelligence agents over election hacks, followed by a subheadline quote from the president stating, all Americans should be alarmed. The article begins, the Obama administration hit Russia with sanctions Thursday and expelled 35 Russian intelligence agents over suspected cyber attacks aimed at influencing the U.S. presidential election, a move that highlighted further rift between President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump, who urged the administration to move on from the episode. A series of retaliatory measures against Moscow marked the first time that the U.S. has named individual Russians involved in cyber attacks. The administration calls the punishment a proportional response to a hacking operation that U.S. officials said was an effort to defeat Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton. The article continues, all Americans should be alarmed by Russia's actions, Mr. Obama said in a statement. These data theft and disclosure activities could only have been directed by the highest levels of the Russian government. Moreover, our diplomats have experienced an unacceptable level of harassment in Moscow by Russian security services and police over the last year. Such activities have consequences. The government also released a report with some declassified details of the Russian hacking operations, which the U.S. government is calling Grisly Step. A few paragraphs later, we are told the president's executive order sanctioned 9 entities and individuals, the GRU and the FSB, 2 Russian intelligence services, and 4 individual officers of the GRU. In addition, the Treasury designated 2 Russians for using cyber-enabled means to cause misappropriation of funds and personal identifying information. The State Department is also shutting down 2 Russian compounds, in Maryland and New York, used by Russian personnel for intelligence gathering, and declared the 35 Russian intelligence operatives as persona non grata. The personnel and their families from the Russian embassy in Washington and the Russian consulate in San Francisco were given 72 hours to leave the U.S. When I read this news, my first thought was that this response seemed a little like pouting. The president was repudiated at the ballot box after stating this election was basically about voting for his 3rd term, and decides the reason cannot possibly be his policies or his party's choice of a candidate. He looks up and down the ballot and discovers that Democrats have lost a lot of momentum while the president was in office. For example, a Fox News article states, the Democratic Party suffered huge losses at every level during Obama's West Wing tenure. The grand total? A net loss of 1,042 state and federal Democratic posts, including congressional and state legislative seats, governorships, and the presidency. Debate the accuracy of Fox's opinion-based coverage if you'd like, but all one needs to do is count the posts that were once Democratic and now something else, Republican or otherwise, to verify the numbers. Now, the president looks at all of his accomplishments and realizes, despite the progress he's made on fronts that are deeply important to him, the American people voted against him. They chose to walk away from the path he put the country on and to take a new one. My opinion is, this offends the president, and when he couldn't find any hope of Secretary Clinton somehow squeezing herself into the Oval Office, he chose to lash out at a man who has made him look awful throughout his presidency, Vladimir Putin. Unfortunately for President Obama, Putin ended up with the last laugh again. This is part of an article entitled, Putin, Russia will not expel anyone in response to U.S. sanctions, from the Russian Times. The article continues. The Russian president has rejected a suggestion of the foreign ministry to expel 35 American diplomats in response to a similar move by the U.S. He said that Obama's act was designed to provoke a reaction, but Russia would not take the bait. We reserve the right to retaliate, but we will not sink to this level of irresponsible kitchen diplomacy. We will take further moves on restoring Russian-American relations based on the policies that the administration of President-elect Donald Trump adopts, Russian President Vladimir Putin said in a statement published by the Kremlin website. Putin said that, unlike the Obama administration, Russia will not target foreign diplomats and their families before New Year's celebrations. We will not forbid families and children from spending the New Year's holidays at the places they are used to. Moreover, I invite the children of all American diplomats with an accreditation in Russia to New Year's and Christmas festivities in the Kremlin, the Russian president said. Putin said he regretted that U.S. President Barack Obama is ending his term in such a way, but he extended his New Year's congratulations to the outgoing president and his family nevertheless. I congratulate President-elect Donald Trump and the entire American people, he concluded. The Kremlin said it will send a government plane to the U.S. to evacuate the expelled diplomats and their family members. Earlier, there were reports that the diplomats were having problems buying tickets on such short notice, with airlines already booked by New Year's travelers. The Russian Times is owned by the Russian government, but I do not detect any bias in this reporting. How bad does this make President Obama look? He kicks out a number of Russian citizens and diplomats, barely even giving them a chance to pack their belongings and settle their business. And what does Putin do in response? He not only shows restraint, he invites American children to the Kremlin to have fun during the holidays, while sending a government plane over to ensure that his citizens do not have to pay exorbitant fees in order to get home. Of course, this is all predicated on if you believe the 35 people the president is kicking out of the United States are spies. If this is the case, a big question needs to be asked. Why the sudden change of heart? President Obama openly mocked the idea of Russians being a threat to the United States in his debates with Mitt Romney 4 years ago. Is this reaction partly because he's being made to look short-sighted and foolish less than half a decade later? What about sanctions against the Chinese for a multitude of hacks against the U.S. government and U.S. corporations? There are reports China even tried to hack an aircraft carrier. Surely this is as serious as trying to gain access to the DNC's emails. And lest we forget, the Democrats have never come out and stated the information contained within those leaks were false. If we had a news media worthy of the name, they would be combing through the Podesta files on WikiLeaks and breaking news stories daily. No wonder the trust Americans have in our media has fallen to an all-time low. And what did President-elect Trump have to say about this matter? Going back to the original Washington Times article, Mr. Trump, in a statement late Thursday, said that, quote, "It's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Nevertheless, in the interest of our country and its great people, I will meet with leaders of the intelligence community next week in order to be updated on the facts of the situation," end quote, he said. In essence, he's telling the nation he'll listen to the evidence, but holding on to the past is not productive. Solid advice from a man who will shortly become the most powerful person on earth.